Ich würde sagen, ich mache das, worüber wir gerade schon gesprochen haben. Wir schauen uns das neue Hexblade-Video an. Ihr wisst, sobald da was mit Star Wars ist, bin ich direkt am Start. Die haben mal wieder ein Lichtschwert gebaut und zwar ein 4000 Grad Lichtschwert und da wollen die ihre Hand reinhalten. Digga, keine Ahnung.
Should I just swing my arm?
Digga, das ist Plasma, das ist fucking heiß.
Right through?
Die sind so verrückt, die Leute.
Show you that in the first 5 seconds of the video. Don't worry, it does happen though.
Mach dir keine Sorgen, es passiert, falls du unter einem Felsen lebst. Das hat der überhaupt nicht gesagt. Oh Gott, die Google-Übersetzer-Vibes. Ich hafte für nichts, was da unten steht. Oh, oh, oh.
Living under a rock, Disney recently announced that they've created the world's first retractable lightsaber. Which is kind of strange considering I have the certificate right here.
Oh, erstmal Disney gebasht. Burn.
Last year. Okay, so ours is still technically a proto-lightsaber since it requires a backpack. But we are actually working on a newer version that might just be fully self-contained in the hilt. But more on that later. So has Disney really made a real working, fully in the handle, gosh darn laser beaming, plasma cutting lightsaber? Well, probably not. It's actually probably similar to the toy lightsabers that I grew up with. In fact, they actually filed a patent a few years ago about it. But of course, patents are always a little confusing to read, and if you're looking at this with an untrained eye, you might be like, yeah, this is a lightsaber. Cool. But if you look a bit closer, it's pretty obvious it won't be cutting through anything anytime soon. Luckily, Ben Ridout on Twitter created an animation that kind of explains the rough concept of this patent, and it's pretty cool. I just hope the LEDs they're using are super bright, because if they are, it will be the most realistic and coolest extendable prop lightsaber on the market.
Okay.
Anyway, let's talk about the closest thing to a real lightsaber on the market. Well, I guess it's not really on the market.
Ich wollte gerade sagen, kann man deren Dinge jetzt kaufen, weil das schneidet halt wirklich durch Stahl oder so. Ja, die Untertitel sind halt wirklich lost, oder?
Since we're not willing to sell it, but I'm talking about our current proto-saber. In celebration of May the 4th be with you, we thought this would be a good time to answer a few more questions about our lightsaber and maybe try a few new tests, including putting a hand through it, which we'll do at some point in this video. Our original
Die sagen uns extra nicht, wann die Hand da durchpacken, damit wir dranbleiben. Die
lightsaber video is now our 4th most viewed video on the channel with over 31 million views. That's absolutely insane. If you add up all the views of all our lightsaber videos, it's over 100 million views.
Der Real Flex. 100 Millionen Views mit Lichtschwerter bauen.
You guys must like lightsabers or something. So let's take a deep dive and talk a bit more about how this actually works, what it can and can't do, and touch on how we're going to make it better for the future. As we mentioned in the build video, the basic principle of our proto-saber is burning a mixture of laminar flow gas. In this
Die verbrennen halt einfach Gas und es ist so heiß, dass so ein Strahl rauskommt. Das ist übel krass.
case, propane and oxygen. It's not creating pure plasma, but there is a certain amount of plasma in the burning blade. What makes it possible is the laminar flow nozzle, which is from GTT, Glass Torch Technologies.
Ey, es ist gar nicht so inaccurate.
That's right, the secret to our proto-saber is a piece of tech that's been around for decades. And I guarantee anyone who's ever used or seen a glass blowing torch has probably waved it around humming lightsaber sounds.
Fühle ich, wir alle im Chemieunterricht. Obwohl die Flammen darin nicht so groß waren.
The cool thing is, we're actually going to be working with GTT to develop a new type of torch, more suitable for our lightsaber-like application, which might just be the key in being able to make one of these fully cordless. Maybe. Either way, make sure you subscribe. So what are the biggest issues with our design? Well, for starters, it's a proto-saber, and having a cord is kind of lame. But we've explained in past episodes, one of the biggest issues with a real lightsaber is getting enough energy into such a small hilt. It's just one of those things that, you know, is limited by our technology of the time. Maybe someday, though. The other big issue that lots of people pointed out is how the length of the blade kind of varies. Since it is a torch flame, it's susceptible to having its gas flow disrupted, like this. When it's pointed straight up, we can get a blade length of almost 3 feet or around 100 centimeters. But when moved fast, the blade can shrink down to a foot or about 30 centimeters, making swinging a lightsaber around kind of difficult. Now the thing I'm curious about is, if it's air resistance that causes this, what if I use this lightsaber in outer space? I'm probably not going to be able to try that anytime soon, but what if I could test it out in a large enough vacuum chamber? Hypothetically, since the lightsaber provides its own oxygen, it doesn't need air to work. And
plötzlich sind wir jetzt in so einem Physikvideo hier gelandet.
It's the surrounding air
ich will doch nur sehen, wie der seine Hand dadurch packt.
Causing this disruption of gas, you might be able to swing this around in a vacuum chamber without the blade changing at all, which would be really cool. The issue is, where do we find a giant vacuum chamber that we can put this in?
Haben wir wahrscheinlich so eine Vakuumkammer, oder?
Seriously, if any of you guys know of a vacuum chamber that this could be tested in, let us know and send us an email at contact@thehacksmith.com. A lot of people also asked what our lightsaber sounds like without any added lightsaber sounds. And well, this is what it sounds like. It basically sounds like a louder version of a mini saber blow.
Ich finde es ehrlich gesagt ein übel spannend, wie die es gebaut haben, aber ich würde gerne wissen jetzt. Stimmt es eigentlich genau?
Which honestly is probably what a real lightsaber
Clickbait, um den dummen Leuten von heute Physik beizubringen. Actually smart.
Would sound like. If a real lightsaber is in fact
Ich finde es halt wirklich interessant
plasma,
tatsächlich.
it would make some noises not unlike that. If a real lightsaber is in fact a laser, well, it probably wouldn't make any sounds at all. Okay, now what about cutting power? In the movies, lightsabers can swing quickly through things, cutting them instantly.
Boah.
Unfortunately, in real life, we have to deal with a branch of physics called thermodynamics, specifically heat transfer. Have I lost you yet? Let's start with a basic example. Take a tea kettle, for instance. Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. A tea kettle heats.
Also ich muss sagen, in der Schule war ich für Physik echt scheiße. Mittlerweile bin ich sehr Physik interessiert, muss ich sagen. Deswegen passt auf, Leute, ihr könnt dann im Physikunterricht ein bisschen flexen.
Element can heat up to 100 degrees Celsius.
Flex.
But water doesn't just boil instantly when you turn on the kettle, or when you blast fire. You see, it takes a few minutes. That's because the heat created from the element needs to transfer into the
Bau das
water
bitte nach, Digga, auf gar keinen Fall, da bring ich mich um.
in order to heat it
Und dann
up.
werde ich auf Twitch gebannt.
Or in the case of a lightsaber, how long does it take for the heat from the lightsaber to heat up the material to its melting point, at which point it would start to cut? So, how
Ich sehe schon die Brain-Like-Emojis.
do we figure out how long that takes? Using specific heat capacity. The specific heat capacity of material is the energy required to raise 1 kilogram of the material by 1 degree Celsius. The specific heat capacity of water is about 4,180 joules per kilogram Celsius. A watt is a joule per second. So how long does it take to boil water? Well, let's try out the calculation. If we take 1 kilogram of water, which would be 1 liter since water is a kilogram per liter in density, and it has a specific heat capacity of 4,180
Wie ihr irgendwelche random Formeln hier in den Chat schreibt.
80 joules per kilogram Celsius, we want it to hit 100 degrees Celsius, and it starts at room temperature, or about 20 degrees. Therefore, the calculation is 1 kilogram times
Junge,
4,180
ich war da nicht mental darauf vorbereitet,
times 80
jetzt irgendwie
degrees
so
Celsius,
Mathe zu
which
machen.
equals 334,400 joules, which means
wirklich-
in order to have a kettle boil
Ich bin wirklich ein bisschen überfordert gerade. Guck mal, ich klicke auf ein Video, das heißt 4000 Grad Lichtschwert gegen Hand und plötzlich rechnen wir hier Kilowattstunden aus. Ich meine, actually, ich finde es sehr interessant, aber ich war echt nicht darauf vorbereitet. Mein Gehirn ist immer noch so ein bisschen fried von dem Event und plötzlich das. Krass. Okay, let's roll with it, Leute. Let's roll with it.
But it's definitely not instant. So if you want to boil a liter of water in a minute, we can divide this total power by 60 seconds, which will only be 5.56 kilowatts. Quite a bit more reasonable. But the average kettle is only 1.5 kilowatts because of the limitation from an outlet. At 1.5 kilowatts of heating power, it would take the average kettle about 3.71
Ich komme da
minutes
nicht
to
mit,
boil.
ich komme da auch schon. Mein Gehirn ist gerade auch irgendwie schon ein bisschen auf Durchzug, bin ich ganz ehrlich. Ich gucke sowas eigentlich gerne auch in meiner Freizeit, dann auch richtig so auf ruhiger Basis, so auf Verständnis und so. Aber jetzt gerade war ich echt so auf, lol, lass uns mit Hand mal anschauen. Und jetzt plötzlich das, ich bin ein bisschen überfordert. Physik, Brain, fuck.
Of water. So yeah, it takes a while to heat things up. Luckily, water actually has a really high specific heat capacity. While water is around 4,200, steel is only 420, or it's water. That's great, right? That means you can slice through a wall of steel 10 times faster than boiling a wall of water, right? That doesn't even make any sense. Anyway, the too long didn't listen to my physics explanation is it takes a long time to transfer heat into an object, or cut an object with a lightsaber. The only things we can control to speed it up is the temperature of the lightsaber or the melting.
Wenn euch das interessiert, bitte schaut es euch an. Ich skippe einmal kurz, weil das ist mir echt gerade too much brain power. Die habe ich einfach aktuell nicht.
Our current saber clocks in at an impressive 2200 Celsius or
Digga,
about 4000
Chat, es war mir wirklich gerade zu viel Math.
Fahrenheit using the current fuel mixture. And a acetylene torch can hit about 6200 Fahrenheit or 3500 Celsius, which is hotter than most materials' melting points. Unfortunately, there are some challenges in running oxyacetylene in a torch like this, which is why we use propane instead. Anyway, the issue is, even at those massive temperatures, we still need to take into account heat transfer. A focused oxyacetylene torch can cut through steel plate fairly quickly, but part of the reason that works is because a cutting torch is good at cutting. It's because it has a very thin blade, which means it only needs to heat up a small amount of material, which means it can cut things a lot faster. Even though our lightsaber is hella hot, It's got a big blade, and that means the heat isn't very focused cutting things. It has to heat up a lot of material before it can start cutting. And unfortunately, that's just the reality of lightsaber physics. In fact, the only time lightsabers were portrayed in a reasonable way was when Qui-Gon Jinn cut through the blast shield doors. It actually showed that it took time to heat up that much durasteel in order to cut through, even though every other depiction of a lightsaber shows it either cutting through things instantly, or in the case of Beskar, not at all. Our lightsaber could cut through a few inches of steel plate. It'd just take a really long time. If we wanted to be able to slice through things and cut metal just like the movies, I'd guess that our lightsaber would have to be in excess of 20,000 degrees Celsius.
Alter, 20.000 Grad, damit so wie in dem Film funktioniert. Krank.
AKA 4 times hotter than the surface of the sun. We could even do some calculations with our handy-dandy specific heat transfer equation, but why bother? If the blade is 20,000 degrees Celsius, you wouldn't even be able to hold the lightsaber. Okay, back to our other lightsaber
Erstmal nachbauen und komplett verbrennen.
Lots of you guys asked if it would be possible to put some kind of solid blade inside of our lightsaber so it could actually deflect another lightsaber. Now that could work, but the issue is most materials that are capable of withstanding this heat are also rather brittle, which means it might work, but you'd still have to gently hit lightsabers against each other, which is also kind of lame. A lot of people also asked, what would happen if you shot a bullet through the lightsaber?
Ja, die fliegt einfach durch.
Would the
Weil
bullet
da ist ja nichts drin.
Well,
Nein,
no.
die ist zu schnell, die wird nicht schmelzen.
No, it wouldn't. And again, we can
Einfach aus Versehen neue Sonne entwickeln, let's go.
thank heat transfer for the answer. Since a bullet would be moving super fast through the blade, I would guess that it wouldn't even warm up because it spends so little time inside of the heat source. But hey, let's prove it. I'm going to use a Nerf gun for our demonstration.
Ah, jetzt kommen die Tests, Leute. Darauf haben wir gewartet.
Now, a Nerf dart has a very low melting point, and it travels a lot slower than a bullet. So, first off,
Der brennt doch. Der
let's see what
brennt
happens
doch.
if we put this into the lightsaber.
Safe brennt der.
Woo!
Komplett abgefackelt
And
direkt.
it's gone. Now that happened pretty quick, but the question is, what if I shoot the Nerf?
Bessere Frage, warum hat er einen Schalldämpfer? Gute Frage. Die brennt auch, oder? Nee, oder? Nee, die war zu schnell. Guck mal, wenn selbst das Ding schon so schnell ist, dann eine echte Kugel auf gar keinen Fall.
Not even warm. And that's heat transfer for you. Because it moves so quickly, it didn't actually take on much.
Das ist der Grund, warum man auch so einen Finger schnell durch die Kerze gehen kann. Das hat man ja auch früher gemacht. So, tick, tick, tick. Hä, guck mal, was ich kann. Und dann macht man es einfach zu langsam, verbrennt sich den Finger. Wem ist das schon passiert?
On the lightsaber.
Dann nie draus gelernt. Nie draus gelernt.
I guess lightsabers aren't actually very good at deflecting things. Or even melting things.
Immer, ne? Ja, chill.
Cut.
Immer.
Alright, that was kind of disappointing, but was to be expected. So let's get to the real meat and potatoes of this video. The reason you clicked on this video.
Ja,
Would this
die Hand, endlich.
lightsaber cut off my hand? Should I just try it? Should I just swing my arm right through?
Macht er eh nicht.
So like we learned, as long as I can minimize my hand's time inside the lightsaber blade,
Wenn er das ganz schnell macht, sollte es
hypothetically, I
doch
won't cut
theoretisch
my hand
funktionieren.
off. My skin and body have their own specific heat capacities, though the human body's ability to self-regulate temperatures kind of changes that. It takes a long time, obviously. A dead hand might actually be a more scientific test, maybe. Yeah, it's a box of hands.
Ach,
And
what the fuck ist das creepy?
Seriousness though, these are actually wax hands from Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum in Orlando. Big thank you to Curtis to sending these to us.
What the fuck, ey, ultra creepy das Paket. Imagine, ihr bekommt sowas per Post, macht es einfach auf und das ist da drin. Boah, ey, Alter, erstmal umziehen.
For a lightsaber test, which, well, you get your wish. We're gonna see what happens. So, all right. Okay, for the first test, we're gonna slowly put this hand through and see what happens.
Ah, das schmilzt ja direkt, ist ja Wachs, ne?
That still takes a while, but that would most certainly be a 3rd-degree burn.
Der macht noch die echte Hand. Krass.
Or a 4th-degree burn? Or is there such a thing as a 5th-degree burn?
Boah, ich mir imagine, das wäre dein Finger. Aua.
It definitely burns the hand,
Ah.
but
Boah, stell dir vor,
what
das
if
wäre
we
dein Finger.
swung the hand through
Fuck.
quickly? And this one,
Würdest du da reinlangen im Sinne der Wissenschaft? Auf gar keinen Fall, Alter. Ich mag meine Hände sehr.
this one has hair in it. So let's see what happens if I swing this through the lightsaber really quickly. Is it gonna heat up? Is it gonna melt at all? And depending on the result, is that gonna give me the confidence required to swing my own hand?
Alter, das macht, Alter, my respects.
Here we go. Karate chopping a lightsaber.
Ja, klar weiß man, dass da nichts passiert bei einer kleinen Flamme, wenn man das schnell macht, aber bei so einem Ding ist es 4000 Grad heiß. Ja, doch. Da ist, glaube ich, nichts passiert, oder?
Not even warm.
Okay.
So
Könnte
do it
klappen.
upside down, see if we can burn some of these hairs off.
Und? Ne, nichts passiert, oder?
Even the hair? Alright, so this can't be overstated. Do not try this at home.
Ja, Bruder, schade. Ich habe ja auch so ein Lichtschwert hier, das 4000 Grad heiß ist. Schade, kann ich nicht zu Hause
I'm a
probieren.
trained professional idiot, and yeah.
Let's go, Leute.
Based on
Darauf haben wir
my
gewartet.
calculations, everything should be fine. You guys ready?
Chat, seid ihr ready? Oh, stell dich vor, er wäre mit der anderen Hand auch rein, hätte sich ja verbrannt. Ey, bitte nicht. Krass. Krass. Einfach krass. Einfach krass. Actually krass. Zumindest hat er den Ring abgenommen. Ja, das ist smart, weil sonst heizt sich da vielleicht der Ring auf und dann hast du hier so eine Verbrennung. Ich habe mir einmal die Hand verbrannt. Ich habe mir so ein Zaubertrick-Ding geholt, so eine Büroklammer, wenn du die auseinander biegst und die dann im Feuer drunter ist, dass sie die wieder zurückbiegt. Ich weiß nicht, ob ihr die so Zeug kennt. Und ich habe das zu nah an die Flamme gehalten und dann mega mich verbrannt. Das war mega stupid. So, krass. Das war krass. Also kann nicht jeder behaupten, durch ein 4000 Grad Ding so seine Hand durchgehauen zu haben. Das
Awesome.
muss man auch erstmal machen.
Wrapped around my hand and through my fingers, and I didn't even get burnt. That's because the time my hand spent in the actual fire wasn't long enough for the heat to transfer into my skin.
Krass. Ich würde es nicht nochmal probieren an
Do
seiner
not try
Stelle.
that at home. Don't try sticking your hand in fire just to see if you can. If you end up holding it in for just a bit too long, you could end up with serious burns.
Hört auf den Mann.
This was a risk. It was a calculated risk on my part, and I'm a trained professional, but don't try this at home. I hope you guys enjoyed this.
Ja, war ein ganz cooles Video. Ich bin ehrlich, irgendwie war da sehr, also ich habe eigentlich nur für 30 Sekunden draufgeklickt, actually. Der Rest war irgendwie Füller gefühlt, aber trotzdem Hacksmith immer Ehre. Bitte abonniert meine Channels. Danke. Stay curious. Lol.